Hello and welcome to the Business of Blockchain. I'm Nisa Amoyals. This special episode focused on a blockchain use case is sponsored by Bitzier. Today we are talking about decentralized science. We are joined by Michael Fisher, founder of DeSci NYC. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you for having me, Nisa.
So what is DeSci?
Decentralized science, DeSci stands for decentralized science. And decentralized science is how can we use the blockchain to improve science? So right now, science has all these sorts of issues. But one of the ideas is, what if we use the blockchain to improve it and we made the internet one giant laboratory so that we could improve science and accelerate science so that anybody could be a scientist and so that there would be 1,000 times more scientists in the world.
And how is that different from TradSci?
So TradSci would be traditional science where it's like, okay, I'm going to do a PhD in a university and I'm going to work for a professor and I'm going to get funding from the government. In DeSci, a lot of the fundamental things have changed. So for example, funding used to be only through the government, but in DeSci, you can sort of crowdsource funding and raise money from anywhere. The governance is slightly different also. In DeSci, in traditional science, you'd have to listen to your professor and do exactly what they say. In DeSci, it's more of a democratized system where anybody can contribute and anyone can say, like, for making scientific decisions, what is the best thing that we should do? Publishing is very different in DeSci. So in DeSci, you don't publish, in traditional science, you publish through a journal. In DeSci, you publish on the blockchain. Data sets are very different as well. So in traditional science, data is all locked in and it's really hard to get access to it. In DeSci, all the data is published and openly accessible on the blockchain.
And what about AI? Everybody's talking about how AI will have this huge impact on science and healthcare and drug discovery. Who is a scientist now?
So today, you have to go through X number of years of undergraduate education and Y number of years of PhD and maybe even do a postdoc, and you're doing all of that so that you can gain knowledge and become a really domain expert in your field. But with DeSci, with AI, it'll change all that, and now you don't have to have so much training because AI will bring you up to speed almost instantly, and you can become an expert just by asking the AI a couple of questions. So I anticipate with AI now, anyone is going to be able to be a scientist, and there's going to be sort of an explosion in the number of scientists that are available because it won't just be people that are extreme domain experts in a specific field, but science will now be open to sort of everybody.
Is the training going to be the same, like biology, chemistry?
Yeah, so when AI starts doing, one of the reasons we have specializations in fields is so that people can specialize in them. But if we think about the different main areas of science, chemistry, biology, physics, these aren't really individual fields. They're all sort of part of this bigger continuum of the universe. And I anticipate that when AI sort of becomes a scientist, there won't be these very specific fields anymore, but all these fields will sort of be compressed into one. So we won't think of it in the same way as individual fields, but as sort of just science in general.
Interesting. Okay.
And people will sort of become an expert in those in the science field as a whole.
So why did you start DeSci NYC?
I started DeSci NYC after I'd finished the PhD at Stanford. I wanted to stay in science, but I didn't want to stay in academia. And so I wanted to start crowdsourcing what that meant. And so DeSci NYC is a monthly meetup for people who are interested in decentralized science. And we have like a speaker come in and talk about a really cutting edge thing in science. We've had people talk around focused ultrasound. We've had people talk around longevity. We've had people talk about cellular rejuvenation. And these very sort of cutting edge topics and how decentralized science can apply to that.
And the entrepreneurs that attend, what are they doing?
They're working on all sorts of projects. There's a lot of people who are working on AI. There's a lot of people who are working on blockchain and decentralized finance. There's a lot of people who are also working on decentralized science projects, such as microplastics, a community for people who are interested in microplastics, a community of people interested in the blueprint diet, and a community of people who are interested in sleep.
And so you started WaterBear.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so WaterBear is a platform for doing decentralized science. where people can host decentralized science projects. And one of the flagship ones that we're working on is around sleep. So sleep is one of the most important things people can do and cheapest things that people can do to improve their health. And making sure people get a restful night's sleep is very important. But that isn't always so easy. So we started WaterBear to allow people to upload their data using an Oura ring of how long they're sleeping, what sort of things they're doing, what sort of things and how well those interventions are working. And once they put those things online, with the interventions that they're doing, other people can say, oh, that sounds really interesting. When I sleep on this certain pillow, I'm getting more sleep. When I take this certain supplement, I'm getting more or less sleep. I'm going to participate in that study. And so they can participate in that study, upload their Oura Ring data of how well that study worked for them, and begin to crowdsource knowledge on what types of sleep interventions are working well for specific types of people. Then all that data is uploaded to the platform, and AI is used to analyze all the data, and people can say, oh, were there any outliers in this data set? Is this data set statistically significant? What other things what would be good follow-up questions based on this data set? And AI is used for all parts of this. So once we had built that, we said, okay, we should use this infrastructure to allow anyone to build a decentralized science project.
Okay, so how does blockchain work as a coordination layer on the data?
Yeah, so right now in a traditional science research project, people aren't really paid for their data. And there's a couple of secondary effects of this. One is that oftentimes data is very low quality because no one is paid to maintain it. With blockchain, what happens is people upload their data, and it goes through a vetting process to make sure that it's accurate or came from a good source, because people are actually sort of given tokens for their data. And if someone ever wants to use that data, once it's been uploaded, someone has to pay for it in some currency, whether it be another token or USDC. So what it allows for is for people to create these very high quality data sets on the blockchain, and for other researchers to be able to pay for those data sets and use them in their own research, whether or not they're related to the initial purpose or for something else. And this is really only possible because the blockchain acts as this coordination network where anyone can buy and sell data sets in the same way anyone could sort of buy and sell tokens.
So why a token, not a dollar?
A token allows a bunch of people who are interested in a task, in a research question, to form without needing any money. So in the same way, we might want to start a company that sells a widget. We don't have any money initially, but we have a lot of ideas around what would make that widget really good. So we say like, okay, I'm going to I'm going to put some data into this data set, and then you get a certain amount of token back. And then someone else comes along and says, oh, I'm going to do some analysis on that data, and I'm going to get some token back. So everyone's doing work and into this data set, and no one's actually sort of getting a dollar, but they're getting credit for their work that they're doing. And this allows for you to sort of, giving people tokens allows for people to start projects without having to worry about getting funding, and it's just about ideas, and it's just about who contributes what, and that allows for these projects to bootstrap very quickly and easily.
Okay, so how does the governance differ?
In traditional science, you have to do sort of what your professor says to some extent. But this leads to sort of a bottleneck in the system. In decentralized science, it's based on a meritocracy. So people are voting on what to do next based on how many tokens certain people own, who owns those tokens as well. So maybe there's someone who's an expert in a certain field. Their vote might have a little bit more weight into what experiment to conduct next.
How does that impact reproducibility?
Yeah, so reproducibility, I think, is one of these things in science that is underlying a lot of issues today. Now, what's really cool about decentralized science is that because you and I are often not co-located, everything we do has to be intermediated by a digital technology. So I have to send you data, you have to send me back analysis. And what's good about this is it leaves a digital footprint that can be traced back to be able to reproduce any sort of DeSci project in either by a human, or I think which will be really interesting is if you have an AI agent go over the chain of who did what, where it came from, and it will be able to assign a reproducibility score.
Okay, and can participants stake their tokens on certain projects?
Staking is an important thing because oftentimes it's not clear which type of experiment is going to work or not work. So and it's important to know this ahead of time because it takes a lot of resources, whether they be time or money, to conduct an experiment. So you really only want to do experiments where they're contested by people. So where two people are arguing very deeply about if the experiment is going to work or not work. So let's take a simple example, and let's say there's a certain type of pillow, and we want to understand if that's going to allow people to sleep longer or shorter. We want people to be able to bet on that experiment so that once 20 people have conducted the experiment, will this pillow work better or worse than the control? And this allows for you to allocate resources to experiments that are only contested and should be done, as opposed to just doing experiments that are sort of willy-nilly.
Okay, interesting. So you've compared DeSci to Henry Ford's assembly line. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so what's interesting about decentralized science is that it allows for specialization in labor. One of the things that I think we've seen in traditional science is that a university forces a grad student or a lab to do many different tasks. So in science, you might have to generate a hypothesis. You might have to collect data. You might have to do data analysis. You might have to publish, you might have to write up the results. Each of these are very different skill sets, right? That's like having one person know how to build the entire car. But advanced economies have specialization in labor, and specialization in labor allows for people to become experts in the field. So one person is really good at installing the seat. In a similar way, one person could become really, really good in doing data analysis. And they're not good at data collection, and they're also not good at writing it up. But they're really focused at this one thing, and they're able to reduce costs and improve quality around that specialization that they're in. And this, I think, can really only happen in this is really well primed to happen in decentralized science because there's interfaces between things. People are communicating, and it's not just all one person having to do the entire task, but people are working together. And so what this allows is for one person to become an expert in data analysis, and for them to then jump around to different decentralized science projects. So they could go to Microplastics DAO, they could go to Sleep DAO, they could go to Blueprint DAO, and become that expert that does this one specific task in many different science projects. And I think the upshot of this is it'll allow for science to accelerate and for science to become much more reproducible.
And DAO being decentralized autonomous organization.
Yes.
So in 5 years from now, let's say, what do you predict? If we have another pandemic, are our vaccines going to be crowdsourced?
Yes, I think so. I think it's very possible, especially with the rise of AI. And I think instead of just having, a couple different sources of the vaccine, maybe the 5 major drugs, you could have 100 or 1,000 different people all coming up with very, very different ideas and approaches to it, and each of them becoming a decentralized science project, and for them to be experimenting in different ways in which type of vaccine is going to work best, and also which type of vaccine is going to work best for which type of person. So with decentralized science, you have access to a much broader swath of people, and so it becomes more democratic and also more fair in who it's tested on. You don't just want to always be testing on a certain subset. And with decentralized science, because you sort of have access to the entire internet, you allow for more ideas in types of things to occur, types of vaccines to occur, but also more input from a broader set of people.
How exciting. Well, we look forward to following your progress. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
That's it for today's edition of The Business of Blockchain. This special report highlighting a blockchain use case was sponsored by BitDeer. I'm Nisa Amoyles at the Nasdaq market site.